We shall begin our series of studies with an examination of socialism. Modern socialism and modern communism both arose from Marx and Friedrich Engels. The words socialism and communism are very much the same in their root meaning. Scholars say that the two doctrines are alike, and that the final results ultimately will be the same. Communist leaders frequently call themselves socialist as well as communist, and they call Russia a socialist nation, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
A failed ideology that never requires purchase. Socialism, a harmless thing until it finds real power, then it's deadly.
Well, Philadelphia City Council now greenlighting a resolution to make a controversial history textbook required reading for high schoolers. The problem, well, Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States promotes socialism.
(2016) America may be on the eve of another political revolution. Bernie Sanders has achieved what would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. As of April 2016, Bernie Sanders, a self-declared socialist, has garnered support from an astonishing 44.1% of the Democratic primary voters. But what does the rise of American socialism mean in the context of the history of socialism? How similar is the American socialist movement to the movement that sparked the Russian Revolution? What has changed between the 19th and 21st centuries, and what has remained the same? In this film, I will attempt to answer these questions by discussing and analyzing the evolution of socialism through 19th century Russia, and then using that structure to contextualize the modern American socialist movement. So let us begin. The fathers were the generation of the 1840s. They grew up on German idealistic philosophy and its emphasis on the metaphysical, religious, aesthetic, and historical approaches. They were essentially Westernizers. They came mostly from the upper and educated Russian classes. The fathers were Russia's form of an enlightened gentry. Perhaps the most influential figure of the fathers was Alexander Herzen. At first an ardent Westernizer, Herzen visited France after the revolutions of 1848, and what he saw disturbed him. He expected to see a changed society where the common people held the political and economic power. Instead, he found that the West had fallen back on bourgeoisie society. This epiphany led him to believe that the West is and forever will be the victim of capitalism. Bourgeoisie society was already too entrenched in Europe to have any hope of reform in Herzen's eyes. Capitalism was the product of industrialism, so capitalism in Europe was Europe's final form. So it was up to the new frontier countries, Russia and America, who lacked a strong past of feudalism and aristocracy, to lead the world in progress. In his words, he said Russia was a country without history, therefore it will be the country of the future. Herzen's argument of Russian exceptionalism is a defining characteristic of the father's philosophy. He also displayed an idealistic vision for the future by his belief in the Hegelian process. In Herzen's eyes, the Tsar, who overthrew the foreign occupiers, brought more freedom to the Russian people. And then, the Decembrists of revolt led to more freedom of expression for the enlightened gentry. And finally, he believed that there would be another revolution, in which the villager would gain true freedom by establishing local communes to guarantee economic liberty and economic equality. Another leader of the generation of the fathers was Bakunin. Bakunin was the leader of the anarchist movement. Unlike his rival Karl Marx, he was not a theorist, but an activist. Men like Bakunin, a contemporary remarked, grow in a hurricane and ripen better in stormy weather than in sunshine. Looked upon as a romantic hero, a man of adventure, the fantastic, and the unusual. This man, said Harrison of Bakunin, was born not under an ordinary star, but under a comet. Bakunin was the antithesis to the nihilists, rational egoists, and utilitarians. He hated the suns. No theory, no ready-made system, no book that has ever been written will save the world, Bakunin declared. It was up to the strength of one's will to save the world. The last of the father's big three intellectuals was Vissarion Belinsky. Along with Alexander Herzen, Belinsky was a Russian literary critic of the westernizing tendency. Arriving in St. Petersburg in the year of 1839, Belinsky went on to write many famous articles in the Russian newspaper called The Contemporary. The Contemporary served as the intellectual battleground between the fathers and the sons, who were then currently led by Chernyshevsky. Belinsky was not known for his philosophical skills, but was admired for his emotional commitment. He liked to say that for me, to think, to feel, to understand, and to suffer are one and the same thing. He was true to the romantic ideal of the fathers. He argued that real understanding not only came from reason, but also from intuition and emotion. He was a firm believer of the notion of individualism, which meant that the self is what makes people human and gives them dignity and rights. Now, onto the sons. The sons were positivists, meaning that they believed that just as the physical world operates by a set of laws, like the law of gravity, society is governed by its own laws. Russian positivists believe that at some point in time, humans will be able to discover and control these laws of society to set up a flawless civilization. There were also utilitarians, materialists, realists, and nihilists who rebelled against accepted values and standards like family control, abstract thought, lyric poetry, school discipline, religion, and rhetoric. They valued natural and physical sciences, sincere human relations, and wanted a society based solely on reason. They strongly desired intense personal freedom and emancipation from tradition. The undisputed leader of the sons was Chernyshevsky. Chernyshevsky despised the fathers. He thought they were all talk, but no action. Heavily influenced by utilitarianism, he thought idealism, romanticism, democracy, and freedom were pointless if the poor were plagued with poverty and starvation. He liked to point out that what good comes from freedom if you are starved. Democracy, in his eyes, led to despotism. He said that Russia needed a revolutionary democracy to throw off all the relics of the old regime. Eventually, nihilism and the son's desire for intense personal freedom paired with populism, which was the ideology behind the political and the economic policy of eliminating capitalism and establishing a socialist system, would lay the seed for revolution. So, in summary, the fathers were idealists, romantics, and nationalists who praised art and culture, while the sons were nihilists and rationalists who believed in an idea of an extraordinary man who would revolt and bring in a new society. The year is 2016, and after a quarter century of recuperation, democratic socialism is beginning to make strides again. Bernie Sanders has dominated a portion of the Democratic electorate and has made the S-word speakable again. To gain a greater understanding of the modern American socialist movement, I set about interviewing 3 socialists at my high school, Francis Parker, and asking them questions that attempt to help fit the American Socialist movement into the context of the fathers versus the sons ideological conflict. Haha, psych. Due to the incompetence of some members of our capitalist society, the camera and the footage was either stolen or lost. If the camera was indeed stolen, the irony would be real. Because if we did live in a socialist society, there would be little need for crime, as all people would have a good degree of economic liberty, and most crime sprouts from poverty and destitution. So thanks, Obama. Anyways, back to the point. To supplement the lack of interviews, I will attempt to summarize and contextualize what I have learned from my notes. What I found was that socialists feel like our current political and economic system has failed them. In my interview with Mr. Taylor, he described how he used to be a fervent supporter of Ronald Reagan. He grew up on a farm with his conservative father, and Ronald Reagan's charisma enchanted him. He said that he never wanted to leave his small town, and his only dream was to grow up to be a farmer like his father. But then, with Ronald Reagan's endorsement, the Farm Bill of 1988 was passed, and Taylor's family lost their farm. Mr. Taylor's dreams were crushed, and he realized that the government in Washington, D.C. did not work for the common people, but worked for the powerful and the wealthy. He decided to go to school where he learned about and became a supporter of socialism. The disillusionment with government is and has been the fundamental driving force behind socialism. From Chernyshevsky's criticism of the bourgeoisie, to Harrison's criticism of the Czar, to Bernie Sanders' criticism of Wall Street politics, socialism has always been against the powerful. What I have concluded from the small sample size of socialists is that the modern movement cannot be called a movement of the sons or a movement of the fathers. Instead, it has a root in both philosophies. For example, the socialists I have interviewed preferred a more global approach to socialist government, opposed to the nationalist feelings of their fathers. But modern socialists enjoyed art and valued emotional and intuitional feelings, more so than the sons. This project has had a profound impact on my way of thinking. It gave me an opportunity to open my mind to new thinking processes in unexpected ways. Mr. Taylor's anecdote about his dream of feeding the people has inspired me to create my own garden, where I can enjoy the spiritual process of feeding myself and others. If you would like to learn more about modern socialism, I highly recommend reading Thomas Piketty's novel, Capital. Capital will teach you basic economic theory whilst going over global economic and demographic trends that will shape the 21st century. It does an extraordinary job of going over the variety of economic systems and their benefits and drawbacks. I would now like to thank Mr. Mizacci for helping me structure my investigation. And I would like to especially thank Taylor, Crowley, and Trotter for giving me some of their time. And with that, I will conclude this video, so thank you for watching. This is Rex Wynn, signing off.